Science Journal for Kids and Teens presents What Was Life Like in Medieval England? Adapted from the original peer-reviewed paper in the International Journal of Paleopathology, published in December 2022. Research conducted by Tianyi Wang and Piers Mitchell, both at the Department of Archaeology at the University of Cambridge in the UK. See the full list of authors and their affiliations in the accompanying PDF. Read by Miranda Wilson. Abstract. We looked for signs of parasitic worm infection in people who lived in Cambridge, England during the Middle Ages. We compared two groups of people who had very different lifestyles: Augustinian friars and common laborers. The friars had better food and lived longer than the common people. They also were more likely to have access to running water and better toilets. Surprisingly, the friars had a higher worm infection rate. We think the reason might be that the friars used human poop to fertilize their vegetable gardens. Introduction. If you could step into a time machine and travel to England in the Middle Ages, what kind of people would you meet? What would the town look like? If you visit Cambridge today, you can see tall university buildings and beautiful churches. But those buildings tell us more about the lives of the rich and powerful than about the typical inhabitants of the city. To learn about the lives of regular people, you have to dig deeper, literally. The town of Cambridge, about an hour north of London, England, has been inhabited for over 2,000 years. It is home to one of the oldest universities in the world. In the photo, you can see a street in Cambridge. Both sides of the road have a wide sidewalk, and the buildings on both sides are 3 to 4 stories in height. We have learned a lot about life in medieval Cambridge by looking at bones from different cemeteries. Your skeleton gives many clues about your life. Bones show scars where they have broken. Your body uses nutrients from food you eat to grow and repair your skeleton. So bones offer clues about the kinds of foods you have eaten. Even the amount of exercise and hard work that you do can leave signs in your bones. People buried at the All Saints by the Castle Parish Cemetery were poorer than average. They had dangerous jobs, like farming and construction. Men living at the Augustinian friary led a different lifestyle. Their environment was more protected and their food more nutritious. They lived together with other friars, wearing the same style of clothes, eating the same food, and doing much of the same work. Both the common people and the friars suffered from diseases and infections. Parasitic worm infections are common in places without clean drinking water and with poor sanitation. Worms lay eggs in the intestines of their host. When an infected person poops, the worm eggs are carried out of the body. The eggs can then get onto food or into the water. Common people and the friars had different diets and lifestyles. Could that mean they also have had different struggles with worm infections? That's what we wanted to find out. Methods. We examined the burials of 44 people. 19 friars from the Friary Cemetery, and 25 people from the Common Cemetery. These people lived between 1100 and 1500 CE. Friars weren't the only people buried in the Friary Cemetery, but we could tell which skeleton belonged to friars because the skeletons still had the belt buckles from their uniforms. At each burial, we took 2 soil samples, one from inside the pelvis and one from inside the skull. We expected that if a person had intestinal worms when they were alive, we would find worm eggs in the soil inside the pelvis, where the intestines were located. We would not expect to find such eggs inside the head. So that second sample was our control. If we found worm eggs inside the skull, we would know the soil overall probably had poop in it. We dissolved each soil sample in a mixture of water and a special salt. We poured the mixture through a series of 3 sieves. The sieves were in order of largest holes to smallest holes. The larger holes captured the soil particles, but let through the parasite eggs. The sieve with the smallest holes collected the parasite eggs. Its holes were as small as the thinnest human hairs. To look for eggs, we used a microscope that magnified objects to 400 times their actual size. Finally, we counted the number of parasite eggs in each sample. Figure 1 shows one of the parasitic worm eggs found at the parish cemetery. This egg comes from a roundworm, which was the most common type of parasitic worm in medieval people in Cambridge. It is seen here under a microscope. The egg is an oval shape with yellow coloring in the center of the image. The scale bar indicates how far 20 micrometers is. Results. We have found intestinal parasite eggs in 11 of the Augustinian friars. We found such eggs in only 8 of the poor laborers. Here in Figure 2, you can see the percentage of friars and common people with intestinal worm infections. In the graph, the x-axis shows friars on the left and common people on the right. Below their names are the number of people with intestinal worms out of the total number of people they tested. On the y-axis, you can see the percent of people with intestinal worms. Looking at the graph, what was the percentage of common people with worms? Just a hint, divide 8 by 25 and multiply by 100. Now calculate the percentage for friars too. Compare the two. Discussion. We were surprised that the friars were more likely to be infected than the common people. The friars lived in a friary, where they had more sanitary toilets than the townspeople would have had. Friars also followed rules about hand washing, so why might they have had more infections? One possibility is gardening. If you have gone to a gardening store, you may have noticed some stinky smells next to bags of manure. Manure is animal poop. Today, gardeners and farmers spread cow and horse manure around plants. Manure has nutrients that plants need to grow. In the Middle Ages, it was common to take poop from the toilet and use it to fertilize fields. The problem is that parasite eggs from human poop can stick to plants. If the friars used human poop for their gardens, they would have been more likely to eat vegetables with parasite eggs on them. Then they would get infected with intestinal parasites when the eggs hatched in their stomachs. Conclusion. Having worms inside you is not a nice thought. Sometimes they can make you sick. Luckily, there are things you can do to avoid getting infected. If you get a turn to help with cooking, you can make sure that fruits and vegetables are washed thoroughly. If you see animal poop in a place where you are playing, let an adult know so they can clean it up. And most importantly, always wash your hands after using the toilet and before you eat. Thank you for listening to this recording. Visit our website, sciencejournalforkids.org, for more free science teaching resources.